How can a loving God send people to hell? This is a common question and one that deserves a fair answer. But first, we must start with biblical definitions and have correct assumptions. Our popular culture defines a loving God as a completely non-confrontational being who tolerates anything we want to do. But that is not a biblical definition. The biblical definition about God and His love is 1 John 4:16, which states that God is love. That means that He does not possess love as we do. He is the very definition of love, and therefore cannot do anything that is unloving. The law of non-contradiction states that something cannot be both true and untrue at the same time. So if God is love, then He cannot be at the same time unloving. The first error present in the question, how can a loving God send someone to hell, is the idea that allowing people to go to hell is an unloving act on God's part. If we say that God is wrong to allow unrepentant sinners to pay the penalty due for their sin, then we are saying that we are more loving than God is, and are setting ourselves up as God's judge and jury. The first step in answering this question is to agree with Scripture that God is love. Therefore, everything He does proceeds out of that perfect love. The second misunderstanding presented by the question, how can a loving God send someone to hell, concerns the word send. The way the question is stated seems to imply that all the action is only on the part of the sender, like when we send a letter. But the Bible teaches that God has given human beings freedom to participate in their life choices and eternal destinations. The way this question is worded seems to say, if anyone goes to hell, it is only the result of God's choice and action, and that the person being sent to hell is a helpless victim who had no say in the matter. Such an idea completely disregards the personal responsibility that God has entrusted to each of us. A more accurate way to word the question would be, if God is love, then why do some people choose to go to hell? Romans 1:18-19 says, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them because God has made it plain to them. So we see that people suppress the truth. God has given them enough truth, but they refuse it. The next verse, Romans 1:20, goes on to say, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. God has taken the initiative to make His truth plain to everyone, and because of this revelation, people are without excuse. Since the beginning of mankind, every people group has sought some understanding of a creator to whom they owe allegiance. Such knowledge is an important part of what it means to be created in the image of God. Another part of God's character comes into play in the question, how can a loving God send someone to hell? God is not only perfect love, but He is also perfect justice as well. Justice requires adequate payment for crimes committed. The only just punishment for treason and disobedience against our Creator is eternal separation from His presence. When we are separated from God, we are separated from goodness, fellowship, joy, light, and everything else that are facets of God's nature. If God were to wink at or excuse our sin, then He would not be perfectly just, and heaven would also be less than perfect. This is why only a perfect sacrifice would be acceptable for the debt we owe God. And the perfect blood of God's Son, Jesus, was an acceptable payment for the debt we owe God. When we refuse Jesus as our substitute, we must pay the price ourselves. God gave us the freedom to choose how we respond to Him. If He forced us, then we would merely be robots, and God would have violated our free will. Love is only love when it is voluntary. We cannot love God unless we have the option of not loving Him. Because God honors our autonomy, He will never force surrender or loyalty. Christian writer and professor C.S. Lewis put it this way:
there are only two kinds of people in the end. Those who say to God, thy will be done, and those to whom God says, in the end, thy will be done. All that are in hell choose it.